For 8 months, nobody had watched Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster fire her weapon in battle. Then 50 enemy soldiers trapped her unit in a thick European forest, blocking every way out, and experienced fighters with years of training started falling in a flawlessly planned attack. The Ranger team had roughly 5 minutes before total destruction. That's when Ariana moved to higher ground 3/4 of a mile away, looked through her scope at shots that broke every rule of what's possible, and showed everyone why she'd been keeping her abilities hidden. Before we reveal what happened when she finally squeezed that trigger, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and hit subscribe, because what followed next turned guaranteed death into a tactical miracle that changed the rules of long-distance fighting forever. The morning mist was so heavy it felt like walking through wet fabric. Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster stood at the edge of Forward Operating Base Sentinel, watching the Eastern European forest vanish into gray emptiness, while her unit got ready for what command had described as a basic reconnaissance patrol. She was 29, average height, thin from years of hauling heavy gear through brutal terrain, dark hair tied back in a braid that tucked under her patrol cap. Ordinary in every way the military had trained her to appear, except for how she moved. Calculated, efficient, like someone who'd figured out the energy cost of each movement and cut out waste. The XM-110 semi-automatic sniper system rested against her shoulder with comfortable weight, 7.62 by 51 mm NATO, capable of accurate fire out to half a mile officially, though Ariana had hit targets at distances that would worry manufacturers. Semi-automatic ability meant several quick precision shots in skilled hands. Devastating. She hadn't fired it in combat in 8 months. Sergeant First Class David Torres was doing final gear checks, his actions reflecting 15 years of leading Rangers through places where errors got people killed. 6 feet tall, built like someone who'd carried heavy loads up mountains, eyes that constantly looked for danger. "Foster, you're with Davidson on Overwatch," Torres called out, checking his tactical map. "Heavy plants in Sector 9. I need advance warning and target spotting." "Copy that, Sergeant," Ariana answered, her voice carrying the flat professionalism that made people think she had the personality of an instruction manual. Corporal Ethan Davidson was her spotter. 23, sharp eyes that caught details others overlooked, still young enough to believe he grasped combat. He'd worked with Ariana for 4 months and spent most of that time trying to understand her. "So Vegas has a betting pool going," he said, as they loaded gear into the Humvee. "Whether you'll actually fire a shot on this deployment or just keep pretending to be a sniper." Ariana inspected her rifle without glancing at him. "Maybe you should concentrate on your job instead of gambling, Davidson." The other Rangers laughed. Over 8 months, she'd earned respect for everything except the one thing she was trained to do. Navigation better than experts, intelligence reviews that were always accurate, could request fire missions that made artillery officers jealous. But shooting, actually hitting targets with that precision rifle, nobody had witnessed it. Specialist Luis Reyes, their medic, spoke up from across the vehicle. "Leave her alone, Davidson. Some people help in ways that don't need showing off." "I'm not showing off. I'm just saying." "You're saying shut up and check your gear," interrupted Staff Sergeant Kyle Morrison, the assistant team leader. 32, quiet skill, the type of NCO who led by doing. "We're leaving in 5. The convoy left at 7 in the morning. 3 vehicles, 14 Rangers heading into terrain that made regular warfare look easy. Ancient forest cover so dense satellites couldn't see through, plants thick enough to conceal entire units, perfect ambush territory. Ariana studied the landscape through tinted windows, her mind already working out angles and distances. Every hill was a shooting position, every clearing was a danger zone, every shadow could hide threats, the forest swallowed them within minutes. They got out at coordinates that looked the same as everywhere else. Trees, undergrowth, the smell of wet dirt and decay. Torres organized them into patrol setup, point element, main body, rear protection, with Ariana and Davidson positioned for overwatch. "Remember, this is reconnaissance," Torres reminded them softly. "Watch and report. We're not here to begin a war, just to see if anyone else is planning one." They entered the forest like experts, slow, careful, reducing noise and visibility. 14 Rangers vanishing into plants so thick you could lose someone at 30 feet. Ariana and Davidson took position on a ridge, overlooking the patrol path. This was her territory. Patient watching, careful planning of shooting lines, constant review. Through her scope, she followed the patrol's progress, while also scanning beyond them, looking for odd patterns in plants, birds flying from specific spots, light bouncing off metal or glass. "Serious question," Davidson said softly, his spotting scope covering different areas. 8 months without firing a shot. That's gotta be a record. Were you always like this or did something happen? My job is to shoot when shooting fixes problems, Ariana responded without emotion. Not to shoot, because someone needs to prove something. What Davidson didn't know, what only Torres knew, and even he only knew pieces, was that Ariana Foster had more verified kills than anyone in the battalion, just not lately. Not since the incident that had gotten her quietly moved from a unit where precise elimination was the main mission to a regular ranger company where she was supposed to fit in. The incident involving a shot that should have been physically impossible, a target that should have been unreachable, and results classified at levels that made high-ranking officers uncomfortable. The patrol went on for 90 minutes without problem. They covered 2.5 miles of tough terrain, recording old fighting positions, left behind equipment, proof that this forest had seen combat before. Then at 9:47 in the morning, everything shifted. Torres's hand signal, stop, followed right away by enemy contact. The patrol froze, rangers finding cover behind trees and ground features, weapons pointed toward threats. Ariana's scope was already searching before Davidson could ask questions. She located them immediately. Movement in the tree line, 450 yards north. Not one or two fighters. Several figures moving with military accuracy. Contact north, she whispered into her radio. Multiple fighters, estimate platoon size, moving to circle around. Torres responded right away. Copy. Foster, keep watching. All elements get ready to move. Before anyone could relocate, the forest erupted. The ambush was textbook flawless. 3 groups, one blocking forward, one cutting retreat, one attacking from higher ground. 50 enemy fighters against 14 rangers, positioned to maximize their edge. Automatic weapons fire ripped through plants. Bullets snapped past positions, smacked into trees, threw up dirt. The rangers fired back instantly, training overcoming fear, even as they understood how badly outnumbered they were. Contact front, contact rear. We're completely surrounded. Someone yelled over the radio, voice struggling to be heard over gunfire. Ariana watched through her scope with detachment that would appear cold to anyone who didn't understand that emotional distance enabled accuracy. She could see the entire tactical picture. Rangers trapped in a natural low area with limited cover, enemy groups closing in from 3 directions. Math calculating toward a very bad ending, very quickly. Foster, I need covering fire on that northern group. Torres's voice crackled through the radio, stress clear despite professionalism. They're about to break through Reyes's position. Davidson was already measuring targets. 450 yards, wind left to right, several movers in heavy cover. You want to begin with no, Ariana said softly. What? Torres just gave you a direct order. The northern group is a trick, she cut in, never leaving her scope. The real danger is on that ridge, at 1100 yards. They're setting up a PKM machine gun that will have clear shooting lines over our entire team. Once working, everyone down there died. Davidson swung his spotting scope to her marked position. Several seconds went by before he even located it, partially hidden, using terrain cover, exactly where a skilled commander would place their devastating weapon. Okay, I see them. So, we report it. Get Torres to handle it. No time. They're working in 90 seconds. Ariana's hands made scope changes, breathing slowing into controlled rhythm, and we're 1,200 yards out. 1,200 yards. Davidson's voice broke. Through this plant cover, moving targets. That's impossible. 5 impossible shots, Ariana corrected casually despite chaos breaking out below. Machine gun, gunner, assistant gunner, loader, and their squad leader directing setup. Miss anyone, they go working and kill everyone. The forest had become chaos. Grenades exploded among ranger positions. Reyes was yelling over radio about injured. Morrison shouting. They were running low on bullets. Foster, I'm serious, Davidson said, real fear in his voice for the first time. That's beyond maximum working range. Threw cover on movers. Even the best sniper alive couldn't manage it. I am the best sniper alive, Ariana said softly. That's why they sent me here to disappear. Now quiet down and track my shots. Her finger found the trigger. Breathing reached that perfect pause between breathing in and breathing out. The world shrank to her crosshairs. The target 1,200 yards away, moving with confidence. They were too distant to hit, and the math of making bullets defy odds. The XM-110's semi-automatic ability meant she could fire quickly. Most snipers would shoot, check, adjust, shoot again. Methodical. Ariana didn't have time for methodical. The first shot cracked like thunder. The rifle cycled automatically, ejecting brass and loading fresh rounds, while the first bullet traveled. She fired again before the first landed, then third, fourth, 5 shots in 2.8 seconds, each with tiny adjustments for wind, elevation, target movement that her brain figured out faster than conscious thought. Through her scope, she watched results in compressed combat time. First round struck the gunner's center mass. As he settled behind his weapon, he dropped without understanding what killed him from over half a mile away. The assistant gunner looked up confused and caught the second round at the base of his neck. He spun away permanently. The loader was reaching for ammunition when the third shot found him, punching through his chest. The squad leader was moving, instincts screaming danger, but Ariana had predicted it. Fourth shot dropped him mid-stride. Fifth shot hit the PKM itself, destroying the weapon, even if someone else tried using it. The round struck the receiver and turned it into scrap metal. 5 targets at 1,200 yards through heavy plants. 5 shots, 5 hits, 2.8 seconds. The forest went quiet for a heartbeat. Even enemy fighters seemed confused by their most dangerous weapon, being eliminated by an invisible threat from an impossible distance. Davidson stared at Ariana like she'd performed dark magic. "Holy crap, how did you?" questions later. Ariana interrupted, already finding next target. "Right now, we finish this." She moved to the northern group, advancing to break through Ranger positions. They were closer, only 550 yards, making them extremely easy by comparison. Her rifle spoke repeatedly, semi-automatic ability, allowing hitting several targets faster than they could react. Each shot was placed with surgical accuracy, not just hitting targets, but hitting them to maximize mental impact. Leaders dropped first, destroying command. Then crew served weapon operators, removing heavy firepower. Then anyone trying to rally others. The enemy force that had been confident in number superiority suddenly found themselves systematically taken apart by an opponent they couldn't see, locate, or fight. Some tried returning fire in guess directions, but they were shooting at ghosts. Ariana and Davidson were in heavy cover at extreme distance, effectively invisible. Down in the valley, Rangers realized what was happening and pushed their edge. Torres organized a counterattack, his team moving with renewed aggression against an enemy suddenly worried about threats from completely different directions. Southern group breaking, Davidson called out, watching through his spotter scope as enemy fighters began pulling back. "They're running," but Ariana was already tracking them. Running was acceptable. Meant they weren't threatening her Rangers, but she made sure they understood the cost of this ambush. Targeted shots dropped anyone still carrying weapons or trying to coordinate fighting withdrawal. The enemy had begun this fight with tactical superiority, number advantage, and perfect positioning. Now they were learning the hard lesson that advantages meant nothing when facing someone who could reach out and touch them from distances they thought were safe. Ariana's rifle continued its methodical work. Each shot was a problem-solving exercise, a choice, an action. She wasn't shooting from anger or revenge. Emotion had no place in accurate fire. She was solving a tactical problem, and the solution involved ensuring the enemy understood that ambushing American Rangers came with consequences. Through her scope, she watched their setup completely fall apart. What had been a coordinated military operation broke down into individuals making survival choices. Some dropped their weapons and ran. Others tried to carry injured. A few attempted to give covering fire, but they were shooting blind at a threat they couldn't locate. Davidson was calling out observations, his voice carrying a mix of professional review and barely controlled amazement. Eastern Group is in full retreat. Western Group has stopped advancing. They're taking cover. Northern Group, Jesus, Foster, there's nobody left in the Northern Group. Then we shift to the Western Group. Ariana replied calmly, her scope already tracking toward new targets. They're the last organized resistance. The Western Group had taken cover behind a natural bank, trying to reorganize. Their commander, recognizable by his positioning and the way others faced toward him, was attempting to restore order, get his people fighting instead of panicking. Ariana watched him through her scope, figured out the shot, accounted for wind, distance, the slight downward angle. Then she made a choice that was both tactical and mental. Instead of shooting the commander, she shot the ground right in front of him. The bullet hit with enough force to kick up dirt and rock pieces, making him flinch and dive for better cover. Then she shot again, closer this time. Then a third shot that passed so close to his position, he could probably hear the supersonic crack. She was sending a message: "I can kill you whenever I want. Right now I'm choosing not to. Run while you still can." The message was understood. The Western Group broke completely, abandoning their positions and running into the forest. The commander was one of the first to run. his survival instincts overcoming his military discipline. The fight lasted 19 minutes from first contact to final shot. When it ended, 50 enemy fighters had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing through forest, leaving behind dead, injured, and weapons. The Rangers held the ground with 0 deaths, though Reyes was treating several injured. The ambush that should have destroyed them had been broken by accurate fire from distances most people wouldn't believe possible. Torres's voice came over radio, calm but carrying undertones of amazement. "Foster, Davidson, meet up with main body. We're gathering and calling medical evacuation." Ariana secured her weapon and began packing up her position with the same methodical accuracy she'd used to build it. Davidson was still staring. "Who the heck are you really?" he finally asked. "You're designated marksman," Ariana replied, standing and shouldering her rifle. "Same as yesterday. Help me collect brass, and let's move." They made their way to where Rangers were building defensive border. The difference in how everyone looked at Ariana was immediate and obvious. Before, she'd been the quiet one who never shot. Now she was something else. Dangerous, respected, maybe feared. Torres met her at the border, expression carefully neutral. "Heck of a performance, Foster. Just doing my job, Sergeant." At 1,200 yards through plants, 5 shots in under 3 seconds, he shook his head slowly. 15 years in the Army. Never seen anything like that. Reyes approached. Blood on his hands from treating injured, but gratitude on his face. 4 of my casualties would be deaths if you hadn't broken that ambush. Thank you. Morrison came up next, his usually quiet manner replaced with something approaching respect. That machine gun position. I didn't even see it until you started shooting. If they'd gotten that thing working, they didn't. Ariana said simply, "That's what mattered." Private First Class Tyler Brooks, one of the younger Rangers who'd been pinned down in the worst of the fighting, couldn't control himself. "Ma'am, I counted at least 23 shots. Did you miss any?" Ariana considered the question. "No." The single word hung in the air. 23 shots, 23 hits at ranges, from 550 to 1,200 yards through heavy plants on moving targets, under combat stress. Brooks's expression suggested he just had his understanding of what was possible completely changed. Davidson sat beside Ariana while they waited for transport, cleaning his spotting scope. "That thing people whisper about, the incident that got you transferred, involved shooting. You're smart enough to stop asking questions," Ariana replied, but her tone was softer than words suggested. "Fair enough," he paused. "For what it's worth, glad you're on our side." "Me too, Davidson. Me too." The review happened in a secured briefing room. The battalion commander was present along with company commander and intelligence officers, who'd arrived from higher headquarters specifically to understand what happened. Torres walked them through the tactical situation using maps and photos, showing how they'd been ambushed and surrounded. Then came the part explaining survival. Staff Sergeant Foster fought from elevated position at ranges exceeding 1,200 yards. Initial targets were enemy crew-served weapons posing greatest danger. Follow-on fights systematically eliminated enemy leadership and heavy weapons, breaking their attack and forcing withdrawal. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Hendricks, studied the map with an expression trying to reconcile what he heard with what he knew to be possible. 52, combat veteran, the type of officer who'd seen everything until now. "Sergeant Torres, you're telling me one sniper with a semi-automatic rifle hit and eliminated several targets at ranges, well beyond standard working distance through heavy plants, with enough accuracy and speed to break a coordinated ambush?" "Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm telling you." Hendricks turned attention to Ariana standing at attention with rigid professionalism, suggesting she really didn't want this discussion. "Staff Sergeant Foster, where did you train?" "Several locations, sir. Standard Army Sniper School, then advanced courses through Special Operations Command." "Special Operations." Hendricks let that hang in the air. "And what brought you to a regular Ranger company?" "Requested transfer, sir. Personal reasons." The intelligence officers exchanged looks, suggesting they knew more about those personal reasons than they'd discuss openly. Hendricks made a choice. Everyone except Staff Sergeant Foster dismissed. "Foster, stay." The room cleared quickly. Once alone, Hendricks's manner shifted, still professional, but more direct. "I've read your file, or the parts I'm cleared to. Sections blacked out at levels I can't access, which tells me you were doing things very few people know about." He paused. "The shot you made today, initial fight at 1,200 yards, on several moving targets through cover. That's consistent with abilities I've only heard whispered about in classified briefings." So I'm asking directly, are you still working for whatever unit you came from? Ariana met his gaze steadily. No, sir. I'm assigned to this company. What I did today was protect my Rangers using skills I've developed over my career. Nothing more complicated. And if I asked you to make that shot again, I'd ask if Rangers needed protecting, sir. If yes, I'd make the shot. Hendricks studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. You saved 14 lives today, Staff Sergeant. That matters more than whatever complicated history brought you here. Dismissed. Ariana saluted and left, feeling Hendrix's eyes tracking her to the door. That evening, in the team room, atmosphere had completely changed. Rangers who'd been ambushed told the story to anyone listening, adding details slightly, but not much, because truth was impressive enough. Davidson had become Ariana's unofficial spokesperson, showing with his hands how she'd fired 5 shots impossibly fast. I'm serious, she just boom 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 boom. And 5 guys at over half a mile just dropped, like watching someone cheat reality. Reyes added his perspective. Without that initial shot on the machine gun crew, we'd have been shredded. No exaggeration. Trapped, surrounded, about to be wiped out. Torres sat in the corner, watching Ariana handle sudden attention with visible discomfort. He caught her eye and gestured her over. You okay? He asked quietly. Not used to being center of attention, she admitted. Preferred when people thought I couldn't shoot. Why hide it? 8 months you've been here. Never once showed what you could do. Ariana was quiet for a moment, because last time I showed what I could do. It started a diplomatic incident, requiring 3 governments to quietly resolve. Target eliminated. Mission successful. But the shot I made, distance, conditions, impossibility, drew too much attention. Made people ask how one sniper could make shots that break physics. Those questions led to uncomfortable places. So they sent you here to basically retire. They sent me here to be a regular soldier. Do regular things. Keep my head down. She gestured around the room. Clearly didn't work out. Torres smiled slightly. For what it's worth, I'm glad it didn't. You saved my Rangers. That matters more than whatever political nonsense made someone nervous. Next morning, Ariana was called to the company commander's office. Captain Nicole Chen was solid, skilled, fair, respected by soldiers. She gestured for Ariana to sit. Got an interesting call last night, she began. From people I didn't know had my direct line. They wanted to know about your performance. Specifically if you were maintaining appropriate operational security regarding your abilities. Ariana's expression didn't change, but internally she swore. What did you tell them, ma'am? I told them one of my Rangers performed heroically under fire. Saved American lives. And I was proud to have her in my company. She leaned back. They weren't happy, suggested you might need reassignment somewhere, even quieter. Ma'am, Chen held up a hand. I also told them, if they tried reassigning you, I'd fight it through every command level I could reach, and I'd make sure the story got shared widely enough that burying you would become politically complicated. She smiled. They liked that even less. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. The compromise is you stay with this company, but get attached to battalion headquarters as sniper section leader. You'll train designated marksmen, develop long-range reconnaissance abilities, share knowledge without being so forward you make impossible shots that draw unwanted attention. Not ideal, but better than being buried in a supply depot. I can work with that, ma'am. Good, because between you and me, Foster, having someone with your abilities in my battalion makes me sleep better. Just try not to break physics too obviously when people are watching. 3 weeks later, Ariana stood on a range with 8 of the company's designated marksmen teaching advanced techniques for long-range hitting. Davidson was there, having requested transfer to sniper section specifically to work with her. The thing about impossible shots, she was saying, rifle in hand, showing proper position, is they're only impossible until you understand all factors. Wind, humidity, temperature, altitude, Earth rotation effect, ballistic coefficient. These aren't magical ideas, they're math, and math can be learned. She fired an 850 yards downrange. A target vanished, then again and again, a rhythm of accuracy that made students understand what she taught. Wasn't theory, it was lived experience from someone who'd made impossible distances look easy. After class, Davidson approached. Question, that shot you made, 1,200 yards through plants, several targets. You said it was just understanding factors. That's right, some of us tried calculating what you did, even accounting for every factor. Odds of making those shots should be very low. Ariana agreed, which is why most people can't make them. But you can. Yes. Why? Ariana considered carefully. Because when I look through that scope, I don't see obstacles or impossibilities. I see answers. Every factor is another thing to account for. Every challenge is another calculation. When math says the shot is possible, even barely possible, I trust the math and squeeze the trigger. She paused, looking at the range where students practice. Also, she added quietly, because sometimes rangers need protecting. And the only thing standing between them and disaster is one person willing to make shots everyone else thinks are impossible. So, you make the shot, handle results afterward. Davidson nodded slowly, understanding more than she'd said. For what it's worth. Really glad you were watching over us that day. Me too, Davidson. Me too. The story of what happened in that forest spread through military channels with the speed good stories do. Details got exaggerated. Some versions had her taking out 100 enemies single-handedly. Others claimed shots from over a mile. But core truth remained. When 14 Rangers were surrounded facing certain death, one sniper made impossible shots look easy and brought everyone home alive. Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster trained dozens of snipers over following years, passing on knowledge that couldn't be found in manuals. Some students went to special operations, others stayed in regular units, but carried understanding that limits were often just failure of imagination. She never talked about her time in special operations, never discussed classified missions or impossible shots that made governments nervous. But sometimes late night in the team room, someone would ask about the longest shot she'd ever made, and she'd smile that small private smile and say, 1,200 yards through plants, 5 targets, that's the longest shot I'm allowed to discuss. The unspoken part, what everyone understood but nobody said, was there had been longer shots, more impossible shots, shots that officially never happened in places that officially didn't exist. But those were classified at levels where even asking questions could end career. What mattered was the present, training the next generation, being ready for when impossible shots needed making, and there was no one else capable. Because sometimes the difference between mission failure and success isn't better technology or superior numbers. Sometimes it's one person with a rifle who can look at math saying impossible and respond with watch me. The quiet professionals, ones who prepare for moments they hope never come, who when those moments arrive, make the impossible look easy, then go back to being quiet afterward. Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster was one of those professionals, and 14 Rangers, who walked out of an ambush alive, would tell you that sometimes the most dangerous person on the battlefield is the one you didn't know was there until bullets started flying, true from distances that shouldn't have been possible. Never underestimate the quiet one. They might just be waiting for the right moment to remind everyone what professionals look like when stakes are life and death. The enemy force that had planned so carefully, positioned so perfectly, and executed their ambush with such accuracy, learned a lesson that would be passed down through their ranks as a warning tale. In modern warfare, you're never too far away to be touched. You're never too well hidden to be found. And sometimes the person you should fear most is the one you never even knew was watching. Ariana continued her work quietly, training the next generation of precision shooters, passing on skills that had been earned through years of experience in places most people would never see. She taught them math and wind reading, and ballistics, but more importantly, she taught them patience, discipline, and the understanding that sometimes the best shot is the one you don't take until the moment when it becomes the only shot that matters. And on ranges across military installations, young snipers would practice their craft, pushing their limits, testing their abilities, and occasionally, when conditions were just right and the wind was steady and the math all lined up perfectly, they'd make a shot that seemed impossible. And they'd think of Staff Sergeant Foster, the quiet professional, who'd proven that impossible just meant nobody had done it yet. Years later, when military historians studied the fight, they would struggle to explain what happened in that forest. The after-action reports were detailed. The ballistic evidence was undeniable, but the math of what Staff Sergeant Foster accomplished that day remained almost unexplainable to those who hadn't witnessed it firsthand. 23 shots, 23 hits, ranges from 550 to 1,200 yards, moving targets through heavy plants, 0 misses. The statistical odds were so low that some analysts initially suspected the reports were exaggerated. They were. Davidson, who went on to become a sniper instructor himself, would sometimes pull out the brass casings he'd collected that day, kept in a small wooden box on his desk. He'd show them to students who thought they understood the limits of accurate fire, and he'd tell them the story of the quietest person he'd ever known, who turned out to be the most dangerous when it mattered most. She didn't just save our lives, he'd say, holding up one of the casings. She redefined what we thought was possible. And then she went right back to being so quiet you'd forget she was in the room. That's what a true professional looks like. The enemy fighters who survived that day never forgot the lesson they had learned. In bars and safe houses across Eastern Europe, the story was told in hushed tones, not as a boast, but as a warning. There was an American sniper, they'd say, who could reach out and touch you from distances you thought were safe, who could see you when you thought you were invisible, who could end your life before you even knew you were in danger. They called her the Ghost in their language, a fitting name for someone who worked in shadows, who made the impossible look easy, who reminded everyone that in modern warfare, you're never truly safe. You're just waiting to find out if someone like her is watching. Ariana Foster never sought recognition, never wanted her name in newspapers or her face on recruitment posters. She understood that the most effective operators were the ones nobody knew about until it was too late. She continued her quiet work, training snipers who would go on to save lives in their own right, passing down not just technical skills, but the mentality that made impossible shots possible, the understanding that limits existed primarily in the mind, and that with proper preparation, discipline, and trust in math, what seemed impossible became merely difficult. And sometimes, late at night, when her former students faced their own impossible situations, surrounded, outgunned, staring at odds that math said they couldn't beat, they'd remember her lesson. They'd slow their breathing, trust their training, and take the shot that everyone said couldn't be made, because she'd proven it could be done, and in doing so she'd given them something more valuable than technique or tactic. She'd given them the certainty that impossible was just another word for not yet attempted by the right person. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage.